Chris Shuring will educate us on the importance of ownership.
Check your email.
Everybody in the world needs their own
You
power.
check your email.
And how you get that power is through an array of different
Share this
options.
link on Facebook.
We're here today to
And say
promote
this is
solar
live.
energy. Solar energy, yes.
Teaching or whatever.
Solar because the question should be asked, why solar? The obvious answer is because of the effect on our planet. We are in the midst of a global industrial revolution. We have many countries coming on board that's trying to catch up to America
Can you do
in
it?
terms of
This
how
link,
they use
but you need to
energy
go to
and
the,
how they
here's the
produce it.
link,
And America can take the lead in that
you
race
need to
by
share this link.
allowing or
On the
changing their attitudes
copy.
towards solar energy. And
Copy
so
link,
today we want to begin
go
what
to
we
your Facebook.
will hope is a series
Go to Facebook.
of seminars to educate the world about the use of solar. As you know, there are many other technologies out there, such as geothermal, which is not practical in a lot of instances. Fracking, which is the big hope for a lot of
What you want to say
companies
here
today
right now.
to
To
frack the
people.
Monterey Shale, which is
Live
we
streaming,
think is
whatever.
not a
Here's
good
the link.
idea because they've already said that California was going to fall off into the ocean. Now they want to ensure that it falls off by digging holes 10,000 feet underground and begin to put chemicals underground to release the energy. Why do that when we have a sun that's been shining? The scientists estimate about 13.8 billion years. It comes up every day. And so we're glad about that. And we want to promote it as a way to preserve our way of life. And so we want to open this. This is New Life Worship Center. And you can find us at New Life Worship Center, woodbine.net, and catch the live broadcast. But you can also find the archives there later if you would like to view this information at a later date. I knew there was something wrong with this mic. And so we are here today to welcome Chris, and we're here to welcome his knowledge. He has over 10 years in solar energy. He's installed over 500 kW of power, and he will educate us on the importance of ownership. So at this time, we'd like to have a word of prayer. Precious Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for this gathering. We thank you for those who are here in this audience tonight. We thank you for those who are with us on the World Wide Web. We enjoy the possibility of the understanding that we are here to get information through your servant, Chris Shuring. And we welcome the information with open hearts and open minds and hope that we will take control of our energy future. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen.
And so at this time, we want to bring
It's nice to be here. It's exciting. We're looking forward to educating you today and talking to you about solar and energy. And I want to correct Charles a little bit. I didn't do 500 kW worth of solar. I've been involved in over 500 megawatts of solar. And that may or may not mean anything to you. That's okay. And we'll go through what that means in the future. So I have a little less than an hour to speak this evening. And my goal is to educate you on many aspects of solar and not just the technical aspects. So we won't get into too much of the technical tonight. What I want to do is educate the consumer on different aspects of solar that maybe they're unaware of. So I want to kind of start off with a little bit of who I am so that you know kind of the basis for my information. So I've been involved in the solar business now coming up on about 10 years. Been involved in commercial and residential solar and have worked in many different aspects. Have also helped projects in Western Africa in the country of Ghana, and Argentina and Brazil, and lots of other areas around the world. And what I find in all of that is that solar is not always just the only option, but it's one of the main options that we should take a look at when it comes to energy. Because, like somebody asked me one day, they said, well, what if the sun doesn't come up tomorrow? Well, you know, friends, if the sun doesn't come up tomorrow, we got bigger problems, okay? The sun has been coming up for a long time. I'm 53 years old. It's been coming up for the last 53 years that I know of, and presumably many years before that, according to the history books. So it's a good, reliable source of energy. We can chart it. We know how it works. It's fairly reliable. And the technology around solar energy has actually been around since the 50s. And it was first used in the military and the space program. And it's been around for a long time. I even have a solar watch that I wear. We see it on cell phone towers. We see kinds of things on our calculators, those kinds of things. So we know that it works. But I guess the question we have to ask ourselves, does it work for us, right? Does it work in our world? Well, it does. And it works for the consumer in a big, big way. And it works for the small business and business owners as well. So it's a great thing. So I've been involved in all those things. I've worked for manufacturers of solar panels. I've been to solar panel manufacturing plants. I know how they're made and those kinds of things. But really, what we want to talk about is how it applies to you in your life, right? So that's my background a little bit. You can look me up online. I'm out there. Into it a little bit and talk about what's the current status, and what I want to do is hopefully through this discussion tonight is to create a conversation. Because if we can create a conversation, then we can start to have a dialogue, and then we can meet this education for an informed. We can generate electricity for ourselves. Now, there's nothing wrong with the utilities. The utilities provide a service. They provide those things that are necessary to get electricity to our homes, keep these lights on, allow this microphone to be heard through the speakers, those kinds of things. But we need to take a look at alternatives. Because if we don't take a look at alternatives, we're going to start getting into trouble. There's lots of news reports that talk about that the grid is having problems. Those things aren't going away, right? We keep increasing in population and increasing in demand, and we're going to need more and more power all the time. Okay? So it's interesting, as I was looking at a study the other day, and in the 1950s and 60s, you might have one TV in the house, a stove, maybe an air conditioner, and maybe a few kitchen appliances. Well, now, I go to some people's houses, they have big screen LCD TVs in every room. They've got 4 or 5 computers. My wife and I, we've got 4 computers in the house, running all the time. They even have electronic cigarettes, right? Good, bad, or indifferent, electronic cigarettes got to be plugged into the wall. They need electricity. So our demand in some areas, our population may not increase, right? So we need to have these alternatives. So the current status is that residential solar is on the rise. We see it all over the place. And we're going to talk later, we may not get into it tonight, but we're going to talk later about finance and the finances around energy and the finances around solar. But it's on the rise. And the reason why it's on the rise is because there's a lot of people out there who have developed financial packages for it. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I'm not going to get into the in-depths of finance till maybe later this evening. But they've created a lot of packages for it, and they've commoditized solar. So what that means is, now what you can take a look at is, if you buy a solar product, if the cost of that is less than your current electrical bill, it's a fairly easy decision to make, right? Because if it's less than your current electrical bill, and your electrical bill gets eliminated, you have a savings. So it has become commoditized, and the manufacturing has become commoditized. And so it's an easier product to buy. When I first started selling solar, we were selling solar at $12 a watt 10 years ago, right? And we were selling it at $12 a watt, and people were buying it. And the electrical rates were at that point where they were. Today, we look at it 10 years later, those electrical rates have been going up probably on an average 6% a year, sometimes more, sometimes less. You know, I have a thing here that PG&E sent me. It talks about their rate hike that's coming. It's going to be more like about 12%. This isn't me. This is PG&E. There's nothing wrong with PG&E. They provide a great service. But we have to look at it in a realistic sense that your rates are going to go up. So they were buying solar 10 years ago at those costs, and the utility rates were significantly less. Today, they're significantly more, utility rates. And solar, you can get solar done on your house for less than $4 a watt. And that's before incentives, before taxes and those kinds of things. So there's no reason not to do solar, because it's more expensive to burn these light bulbs than it was 10 years ago. And the cost is significantly less than it was 10 years ago. And so why not do it? There's no reason not to. And so I tell people, I say, if you have a flat surface and the sun shines on it, you should put a solar panel on it. Right? I have people that call me and say, well, my power bill is only $50 a month. Well, how would you like it to be zero? I got a guy right now, we're doing a system for him. His power bill is only $100 a month, so we're putting a small system on his house. He's put it on his credit card. He's paying it off at the end of the month. He has no power bill for the rest of his life. Right? It's a good thing. I talked to a gal the other day. Her nephew, I'm not going to name names because they'll come get me, but her nephew 10 years ago told her, don't do solar. It's not worth it. You'll only save $180 a month. You'll only save $180 a month. Oh, and by the way, you're getting kind of old. So really, is it really going to be worth it? I talked to her and said, let me put it this way. In the last 10 years that you didn't do solar, I just calculated it with my calculator. You spent $18,000 more for utilities than you should have. And you could have had it done for free, no cost to you, zero down. Could have had it done, and you would have saved $18,000. And guess what? You're still alive. Right? Because you're talking to me. So I know I'm going to go through a lot of different things as I go through this talk. And it's really, like I said, my goal is to stimulate the conversation and create that education and to create that connection so that we can talk later about how solar can affect you. So bear with me as I go through a bunch of stuff, and I hope I hit some things. And then at the end of this, I'll take questions and answers. It probably won't be on the live internet feed, but I'll take questions and answers of everybody here in the audience so that I can get those questions taken care of for you on a personal basis. So those are some of the things. Now, you'll hear a lot of terms in the energy industry, and my goal is that when I first got in the energy industry, I came from the computer industry. So I spent 20 some odd years in the computer business, running computer and data centers internationally for companies. I've done a lot of different things, worked in nuclear. I have a couple patents to my name in carbon capture and storage technologies and those kinds of things. But most people, when you talk to them about energy and you talk and say, hey, let's talk about solar, they're not from this world. They're not from where I come from. And so they get confused on no clue is what he's talking about. I kind of would, but I wouldn't have any clue what he's talking about. So like when Charles said, KW earlier, what that means is 1,000 watts. So if I had done 500 kW, that means I would have done 500,000 watts of solar. Okay? But what I've actually been involved in is 500 megawatts, which is 500 million watts. A significant difference, and that's okay. But the terminologies can get very confusing to the consumer. So when somebody comes and says, I'm going to do a PPA lease on your roof, and we have to get the interconnect agreement done, and once the interconnect agreement done, we need to do the inverter, which is going to take it from DC to AC, and you're going to lose 15% of the value in that conversion, and we're going to put panels on your roof that are mono panels, and they're made in China, and they've got an aluminum frame, and they're going to sit on DPW racking, and we're going to use a junction box that looks like this, and we're going to put these kinds of things on it to make it better. It's like, really? Seriously? Right? Most people don't understand what I'm talking about, and that's okay. About what people are trying to sell them, because it's really not that confusing. When I talk to people about buying solar, I put it this way. You're going to spend money on your utility bills anyways. You don't want your ice cream to melt. You don't want your standing rib roast that's in the freezer to go bad. You don't want your milk to go sour. And you want to have your lights on and your TV and your radio. You're going to do that anyways. Right? You're going to pay those bills anyways. So why not reduce those bills by putting an ATM machine on your roof? Because when it comes to residential and commercial solar, it's a financial equation. It's putting an ATM machine on your roof. Because what the solar panels are going to do is create energy. When they create energy, that energy is put out onto the grid and you're paid for it at full retail value. And when you're paid for it at full retail value, you're allowed to pull that energy back off the grid and use it when you need it. And we'll get into net metering and some of those other things in a little bit, but you're able to use it when you need it. So if I have a solar system on my roof that generates $200 a month worth of power, and I've got $100, and I have a $200 a month bill coming in for my electricity, and I take that $200 and I pay for electricity and I pay it for my solar, I've now just eliminated my solar bill and I have now got $200. I can choose to pay my utility bill, or I can choose to eat ice cream with it, in effect. Right? So I've created cash on my roof. The question is, what are you going to do with that cash? And how much are you going to produce? And that's where the engineering comes in. About solars. Don't get all caught up in the technical aspects of it. Because you don't need to know those things. It's nice to have that information and it's available to you, but don't get all caught up in all the technical jargon, because it's pretty simple. Solar panels have no moving parts. They sit on your roof. They create electricity, goes out to the grid. You get paid for a full retail. You can do whatever you want with that money. I suggest you pay your electric bill, right? And if the cost, I have some people ask me, says, well, if the cost of doing the solar is equal to my electrical bill, should I do it? Here's the reason. If I have a $200 a month electric bill and I buy a solar system, however I finance it is not part of this equation right now, but I buy a solar system and it costs me $200 a month. It's going to cost me $200 a month for the rest of my life. Is that a good deal? It is a good deal. The reason why it's a good deal is because this is going to cost me $200 a month for the rest of my life. This utility bill will go up 6% for the rest of my life every year. So, first year, maybe even Stevens, zeroed out, zero-sum game. You didn't save any money. Next year, you're going to start saving 6%. So even if it comes in and it's exactly the same, you should do the solar, because it's going to give you an option for the future. And then guess what? Once you put it on your roof, there's a very high probability, I'm not going to say definitively, but there's a very high probability that your house and your commercial business is going to be worth more money. Because guess what? If I'm going to buy a house, I want one with an ATM machine on the roof. Because when I buy the house, we're going to pay that solar off. Now I've got an ATM machine on the roof making me $200 a month. Right? $200 a month times 12 over the life of a house can be, well, 10 years, it's $18,000. Right? I'll take the $18,000 every day, all day. So that is kind of my view on where we're at with solar, that yes, you should do it. You know, and some people will ask me, well, if we keep doing solar, is the utility going to continue to support the programs that support solar? Well, for the most part, yes. I can't say that in every jurisdiction in the world and all over the place that everybody's always going to support solar. Can't say that, but we're not always. But we need to understand that when they shut off Diablo Nuclear Power Plant and when they shut off San Onofre Nuclear Power Plant and when they say that we can't bring coal-fired power across the border into California anymore from the four corners, and they shut down dams on the Colorado and the Columbia River because of the salmon run, those things are all good. You know, we want to have salmon, we want to have less coal power and those kinds of things. But those are the things that are keeping our lights on right now. And if we just say we don't want those things without coming up with an alternative, we won't have lights. This last summer, I spent some time in India. I was in India in a city that has 15 million people in it. And in a city of 15 million people, the power goes out 5 times a day. 5 times a day. If you have a business in Hyderabad, India, you better have some battery backups because of lights. And the lights would begin to flicker. When the lights begin to flicker, that camera back there that's filming all this and the computer system that's making it all happen goes away. It'll burn them up. So these things are real, right? So some of these countries have to do these kinds of things, but we've got to come up with alternatives, otherwise we're going to be in the same boat, right? I'm a big supporter of distributed energy generation, right? Distributed energy generation means that if I'm over here and I generate power in the Nevada desert, but everybody who's going to use that power is over here in Los Angeles, that's centralized energy, and I've got to transmit it from over there over to here. The challenge with that is we lose power. There's costs. There's risks involved in those kinds of things. So why not create energy where we're going to use it? If we're going to use it in our houses, let's create it in our house. If we're going to use it in our community, let's create it in our community. Right? So distributed energy says I'm going to create power here, and I'm going to use it within a reasonable geographic area so that I can reduce risk, reduce costs, and make power more readily available to everybody. So, yes, the utilities will be supporting solar, and they will be supporting many of the initiatives that help solar. I don't want to get into too many of the politics of it, but other energy industries, ones that claim to have used they are subsidized to a huge extent in this country and in many other countries. And the subsidies that alternative energies get are minuscule in comparison. So they're going to keep being supported. And in that, people will tell me, well, geez, I had a guy the other day. He says, well, I'm going to put solar panels on my house, but won't I have to replace them in 5 take them off the house? No. No, he won't. And because all top tier, number 1 or number 2 solar panels in the world have a 25-year warranty on them. Well, if they got a 25-year warranty on them, that tells me that they're going to operate for at least 25 years. So why would I even look at having to take them off in 10 years? Well, some people will say, well, won't I need to upgrade the technology in a couple of years? No. You know that one of the first solar panels that was made, I think it's in Bell Labs, it was designed to power an incandescent light bulb. I believe it was made in 1952 or 53. There was actually solar panels made before that, but They were a lot rougher in their design. That solar panel that was created still to this day powers the same wattage of incandescent light bulb. Still powers it today, right? So there's no need to upgrade technology, because if I put a system on your house to power your house for the needs that you have today, it will power those needs for a long, long, long time. Now, if all of your kids move back in the house and you've got 19 new TVs and you've turned on 2 new air conditioners, that's a whole other story. But it will do what it was designed to do for a long, long time. You don't need to upgrade that technology. So the technology changes, but it doesn't change that much. Now, I mean, some people are now saying to themselves, there's lots of new technology. Yes, there is. There's a guy that I know that has this really cool technology. You can put it on your roof, and it'll generate all kinds of power, and it'll cook bread, and it'll heat all kinds of things. Challenge is, you can't get any bank to give you the money to finance it, and it's too costly for you to buy it, and it's what we would call unbankable. And if it's unbankable technology, you're not going to see it in the mainstream. Okay? It's just not going to happen. So, there are technologies out there, for sure. But in the mainstream consumer market, the changes are maybe 1 or 2% a year, tops, in the technology. The other technologies that are making leaps and bounds, they're 15 or 20 years out, if at all, before you'll see them in the consumer market. I mean, it took solar panels, probably almost 25 years or something like that to really even get involved in the consumer market. There was solar water heating and things like that, but the panels that you see today, they didn't get in the mainstream market until the last 20, 25 years. Right? But they've been out there since the 50s. Same thing with these new technologies. So yes, technologies will change, and there will be new technologies. But when I tell people this, I say, look at it this way. If I buy a car today, and I know some people are going to say, well, I want a new car tomorrow. But if I bought a car today, and the purpose was to have a car that ran on gasoline and had 4 wheels that got me from point A to point B, as long as that car kept getting me from point A to point B under those same circumstances, the car is still functional. Now, we may not like the stereo anymore. We may want better gas performance, but the car still functions for the purpose it was purchased for, under the conditions it was purchased for. Solar panels are much the same way. There are minuscule changes, but you're not going to see any great leaps or bounds entering into the consumer market. And when they do, it'll be somebody who writes a big check for it. And we know some of those companies, we've heard of them, they're no longer in existence, that we as taxpayers and others wrote big checks for them, but they didn't enter into the consumer market. So, technology will change, but don't let it worry you, okay? And at least in this country, and those of you who might be listening online and watching us online, the companies that generally install solar are contracting companies and general contractors. And yes, they come and go. But here in our audience today, we have solarroofs.com, and they've been involved in the solar business for how many years? 35 years. It's the same thing as any other thing you buy in the consumer market. If you want to buy a system from somebody who's stable and sincere and has integrity and is going to be around for you, look into somebody like solarroofs.com. Don't look into the guy who's just got his brand new pickup truck down the street. And I'm not saying he's not skilled. I'm not saying you shouldn't do business with him. But don't complain if 6 months from now he's out of business. Okay? But the components that he put on your roof, more than likely those businesses are not out of business. And in most cases, there is going to be a contractor warranty and those kinds of things that hold under contractor law and those kinds of things to help protect you in that. But if I put Mitsubishi panels on my roof and somebody else installed them, the chances that Mitsubishi is going out of business is pretty slim. I can always call it Mitsubishi and say, hey, I have some of your panels on my roof. Who can you direct me to help me? And they'll find somebody. Mitsubishi, by the way, has been around since 1830. It used to be the largest company in the world until after World War II when we decided to tell them to break up, much like AT&T. They're a huge company. So there are companies out there who provide these materials that will be around. Contractors, some of them will come and go. But it's the same as anything else you buy. If you buy a pool and you have the pool installed, 10 years from now, the guy you had put in the pool may not be around anymore. Right? So just check it out. If you're gonna buy something, if you're gonna buy solar, you're gonna put it on your roof, use somebody like solarroofs.com that's been doing it for 35 years. Right? Some of the other questions people ask me about when they do solar is that, they're going to put solar on my roof, and my roof's going to leak. And they're going to be up on my roof, and they're going to make my roof leak. Well, there's a lot of good technologies these days that make it so that that's not going to be a problem. And again, that gets back to the person who's installing it. If you use somebody who's reputable, who has done it for 35 years, who's been on people's roofs, that's not going to happen. Right? Every once in a while you might have a leak or a problem, but every once in a while you might have a flat tire in your car too. So that's part of how things work. Nice thing about solar is there's no moving parts. The only part in solar that can go bad for the most part is the inverter. And the inverter, it might have a 10-year life, it might have a 15-year life. Depends upon what brand you buy and how you buy it and whether it's got an extended warranty on it and those kinds of things. But that's all, again, part of dealing with reputable companies so they can engineer a system for you that's going to do all those things for you. So that's that. The next thing I want to talk about is finance. And we got about 25 minutes left, and I want to talk a little bit about finance. Now, I'm actually reading from some paperwork that I have because I'm going to be writing a book. And part of these discussions and seminars will be part of that book. And I hope to have that book written sometime late in the spring. And I hope I can encourage you all to buy a copy. So anyhow, that's one of my goals is to be an author. So we're going to get that done. So let's talk about finance for a minute. Now, earlier I talked about the commoditization of solar. You can now go to Best Buy, Home Depot, and buy solar for your house. So it's no different than buying, I saw a big screen TV. It wasn't big. It should have been gargantuan screen TV. It was like 80 or 100-inch screen TV. They had people on the TV. I was standing next to them. They were on the TV. I thought they were real people. I mean, it was odd. $20,000 TV. Okay? $20,000 TV. Next week it'll be $19.95, but today it's 20 grand, right? But so the financing of solar has made it so that it's an easier decision for the consumer to buy solar. And that includes, when I say consumer, that means includes small business and commercial as well. Because it's all about payment. I remember one time I was talking to a chief financial officer of a corporation, and I said, look, I'm going to save you $500 a month on your energy bill. Do you really care how I do it? Do you care if I put solar on your roof or squirrels in cages? No. Just if you're going to save me $500 a month, save me $500 a month. So it's all about the bottom line. Well, to get to the bottom line, there's many paths. And you'll find that I tend to, and I want to make sure I choose my words carefully, not enjoy the process of many of the leasing programs that are available for the consumer market. I don't know them all, but the ones I do know, you probably won't hear them coming from my mouth in this setting. Because I think that they're just fundamentally not good for the consumer. Fundamentally. Again, I'm not going to categorize all of them, kind of, sort of, but fundamentally they're not good for the consumer. Why are they not good for the consumer? You will end up with a lesser payment for your electrical bill. because otherwise you wouldn't do it. So you'll get a smaller payment for your electric bill, and that's a good thing. But it locks you in to a payment and a contract that is very difficult to get out of. And you're paying just frankly too much. So if you didn't do the lease, let's say you did a lease and you were saving $100 a month. Well, if you didn't do the lease through some other financing programs that I'm going to talk about here in a second, you might save $200 a month. Right? So you're actually going to pay less, right? So if you can pay less for it, the capital cost to buy it, if you can pay less for it through some other programs, that's a better thing to do, right? Now, leasing, you might be able to qualify for leasing. You may not qualify for some other things, right? So we need to take a look at those kinds of things. But there's things like here in the Sacramento area. We're in Sacramento tonight. So here in the Sacramento area, they have a program called Y-Green. And Y-Green uses, they're the financing mechanism for a thing called the PACE program. And I don't want to stand up here and promote any one type of financing, but what I want you to understand is that there are many options to get financing. So when I talk to a customer and they say, I want to do a solar system, and the solar system is going to cost me $25,000, we come to that conclusion first, and we say it's going to cost you $25,000. Now, how can we finance it? Right? Or do you want to finance it? I have a guy right now that says he's just going to write a check, right? So how do you want to finance it? So let's talk about the PACE program real quick. The PACE program is a program that's been instituted in the United States in a lot of different jurisdictions, and it needs to be approved by each municipality. Well, once it gets approved by each municipality, then what happens is you can do energy upgrades and conservation upgrades on your residence and now commercial as well. And the cost of that goes directly to your property taxes. And why is that good? The reason why it's good is if it's applied to your property tax. So let me ask you this. If you have a home, and I'll just say in the state of California because I don't know what they do in Wyoming or North Dakota, but in California, if you have a home, your property tax can be, I'm going to say a disclaimer, I am not a tax advisor, so don't take my tax advice, can be tax deductible in the state of California, your property tax. But if you don't have a business in your house, your electrical bill cannot be. Correct? So, if I do the PACE program, I can put my cost of my electrical bill, which will be less, on my property tax, and guess what? Now my electrical bill and my property tax are tax deductible. Okay? So you can get another, let's say your property bill, you increase your property tax by $300 and your previous electrical bill was $500. You're saving $200 and you're writing $300 more off of your taxes every month. How does that apply to you? I don't know. I can put you in touch with people who can help you get to that equation, but I'm not a tax advisor, as my disclaimer said. So it's a good program. And the other thing about it is, let's say I own a home and my credit score is 300, right? And I have no money in the bank, and I have a decent job, and I'm paying my bills, and I've paid my property tax on time for the last 12 months. PACE program's only qualification is that you've paid your property tax on time for the past 12 months. Your credit has nothing to do with it. So the PACE programs are great because basically it's the property that's buying the solar or the roof or the air conditioning unit or the windows or the water heating, all those kinds of things. So the PACE program pays for all those things, and it doesn't hit your credit. It doesn't matter what your credit is, as long as you've paid your property tax every month for the past 12 months, however you do that, then you're good to go. So the PACE programs are really good. And I talked to a guy the other day, and he says, well, what happens if I sell my house? You move. It doesn't affect when you sell your house. It's part of the property tax. You sell your house and you go all in and you leave town. Next guy takes it up. Not a problem. But the nice thing is the next guy that takes it up has no power bill either. Well, guess what? If he has no power bill, like I mentioned earlier, guess what happens? The value of his house just went up. Right? If you have a commercial property, the value of your commercial property went up according to your CapEx value of how much power you're generating on the roof with no capital investment. Right? So that's a really good program. One of the local banks that I've been talking to, they're out of Oregon actually originally, they have a program, they call it the Green Street program. And the Green Street program basically can come in and they look at 10% of value of your house, and you can get a loan. It's an equity loan. Up to, if your house is worth $200,000, you can get $20,000. You have to have a decent credit rating, but you get to keep all the tax benefits and everything else on the solar program. And you can pay for that solar program, pay it off sooner, and you just get that loan from them at, I think their current rate's like 5 3/4 interest rate. So it's pretty good, right? There are a few other banks that have some programs out there. There's a PACE program in Southern California, and it's financed by a company called Hero. There's another one that's financed by a company called Fig Tree. All these guys have really great programs to be able to buy solar. Now, when we talk about a solar project and it costs $20,000, there's also a thing that's in place right now, and it will be in place until 2016, and that's called the ITC. The ITC is the investment tax credit. And the investment tax credit says that if my solar project costs me $20,000, I can get a 30% investment tax credit. So I can take that tax credit, $6,000, and I take it and put it on the bottom line of my income tax and reduce my taxable income by $6,000 directly. It's not a tax deduction, it's a tax credit. So as a homeowner, I can take $6,000 off my taxes right off the bottom line. So now my taxable income is lowered. Oh, and for those who are listening, if you have in the United States, if you have a commercial building, there's also the opportunity that that tax credit will lower your AMT. And if you have a commercial building, you know what that means. So it could lower your AMT. It's the only tax credit that allows you to do that. So if you're up against AMT, you're in commercial property, you can do that and you can lower your AMT with these tax credits. So the finance can be very complex. There are companies out there, I have some brochures up here that I was going to use as reference, but they have a couple companies' names on them, and I don't really want to get into a problem with that, so I'm not going to mention it. But they're out there selling these leasing programs, and they're not doing a service to the customer. The other thing you're going to hear about is a residential PPA or a commercial PPA. And if those are, we'll call those a modified lease. And what that stands for is in the energy industry, if I am a producer of energy, I'm a generator of energy, I'm called an independent power producer, an IPP. To a utility like a PG&E, and then the utility sells it to you, the customer, via your meter and the grid. Okay? The contracts between the IPP, the independent power producer, and the utility, the term for that type of contract is called a power purchase agreement. So there's been a lot of people over the last 4 years, me being one of them, I used to write them. I did several hundred of them. Did residential PPAs. And residential PPA says, I'm going to install solar on the house, and as a corporation, I'm going to retain ownership of that solar as a generation facility, and I'm going to sell you the power as it's generated. Now, the PPAs for residential can be pretty tricky. One is because they have a lot of wording in them that are energy and utility related. And if you're not up to speed on what those terms mean, you could get yourself in trouble. So on a PPA, a residential PPA, they'll have what's called a floor and a ceiling. And the floor and the ceiling protects the investor, it doesn't protect the consumer. It protects the investor. Because the investor says, if I'm going to invest in this project, I want to make sure that I get a certain rate of return. If I don't get that certain rate of return, I'm an unhappy camper. So I want a floor and a ceiling, which says that no matter what, somebody's going to pay this bill. The floor. So if you have a residential PPA and it has a floor in it, and you're doing home remodeling and you shut your house off for 90 days because you're doing home remodeling and you have no electrical bill, you still got to pay the floor. You can't get away from it. No matter what you're generating or not generating, you have to pay the floor. And there's a ceiling, and the ceiling says we'll only pay you electrical generation up to a certain point. Anything over that, you don't get compensated for. And so there's a floor and a ceiling, and they use these terminologies that are really predicated on the utility industry and the relationship between IPPs and utilities. And if you're not familiar with the jargon, it'll confuse you, and I recommend that you don't do it because it could get you in trouble. If you have a house full of kids and you sign a 20-year PPA and all those kids move away to college and now your electrical use goes way down, you still got to pay that floor. And what if that floor is more than what your current usage is? Doesn't matter. You have a contract. You can't get out of it. Oh, and by the way, some of the leases and some of these PPAs allow you to get out of the contract, but the price you have to pay to get out of the contract is more than the system actually costs when you had it installed. Let me give you an example. And that, again, I don't want to get too technical, but if I paid $20,000 for a solar system and I lease it, there's a 30% ITC credit that goes to the person who took the financial risk. And in this case, we'll call it the leasing company. The leasing company gets that credit, right? Plus, they're buying solar equipment at a highly discounted rate because of the volume that they're buying at. So they probably didn't actually pay $20,000 for it. That was the retail value. They probably paid closer, their margin, we'll call it 30%. They probably closer to $12,000 is what they actually paid for it. But they're getting a 30% credit on the $20,000 because that's retail value. So they get $6,000. Now they've reduced that system down. We'll call it $7,000, $8,000. We'll be generous. Their actual out-of-pocket was $8,000 on that solar system. You know that some of these leases say, yeah, you can buy that system back and buy out of that lease in 10 years. And they use those numbers that I just gave you for $10,000. It didn't even cost them $10,000 when they installed it. But they want you 10 years later to buy out of that lease at $10,000. Not such a good deal, right? So you want to check these things out. So, and the PPAs are a lot the same way. What are their buyout clauses and those kinds of things? You want to make sure that those are taken into account. So, anyhow, so financing can be tricky, but I suggest that you look at many options, not just the option that the one salesman comes out and tries to sell you. Now, I'm a salesman, right? And so I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I want you to. But I'm here educating, and what I want to educate you on is that if a salesman comes out and sells you solar and he says, this is your one and only finance option, and you need to sign here today, otherwise the deal changes, I would highly recommend that you look at other options. I'm just saying, right? If you're going to make that big of a commitment, it shouldn't be done like that, and you should look at other options. Call up your banker. I called up 6 banks in the last 2 days and asked them what their programs were. I ran some calculations. All of them, bless you, all of them, no matter what the bank, no matter what the amount, were better than a leasing program. And guess what? You get to take the 30% ITC and all the incentives that might come along with it. Some jurisdictions give you some solar other credits and things that you might be able to use as well. I guess what I'm saying is when it comes to solar, ownership is the best way to go. And if you're going to own it, weigh your financial options just like you're going to weigh the options if you're going to go buy a new car. Right? Weigh your financial options. How's it going to impact you? I can't tell you one way or another to go from this podium. But if you meet with me one-on-one, I'll tell you some different ways to go. Right? Some different people to do business with. But getting back to a little bit of the beginning is that when it comes to the consumer, when it comes to people buying solar for their homes, and when it comes to putting solar on your business, it is a financial decision. It is not a technological decision. Okay? If you go with somebody like solarroofs.com, it's definitely not a technological decision. It's definitely not a contractor decision. It is a financial decision. And you need to weigh your financial options properly. Now, I know that we're all going to go out and make decisions. We're impulse buyers. That's the way we are. And that's okay. But I'm just here to tell you that weigh those things as best you can. So, let's talk about net metering for a minute. When it comes to financing, net metering is always a discussion. I've got, looks like about 9 minutes left, and it should take me about 9.5 minutes to go through net metering. I'll talk slower. Net metering is the process of spinning your meter backwards. If you have an electrical meter on your house or your business and it spins backwards, you are net metering. That's the law. That's what they call it. Now, is net metering available everywhere? No, it is not. Some countries, they don't even know what net metering is. It doesn't exist. Some cities and states, you can only net meter a certain amount of power because that's just the way it is. In Hawaii, for the longest time, whether you were a business or not, you could only net meter 50 kilowatt hours, so 50,000 watt hours was all you could net meter. They raised that to 500,000 in the last couple of years. But all you could do was 50 kW, right, on the entire islands. And they do that because the utility is trying to figure out what to do. And so that's okay. I don't fault them for it. But just keep in mind that the term net metering says I'm going to spin the meter backwards, and in most jurisdictions I'm going to get paid, I'm going to be compensated at full retail value of that electricity that's being generated back onto the grid in most jurisdictions. That's what the term means. Now, this is how it works. I put a system on my house, and I start turning the meter backwards. And the next question I get from people is, when are they going to send me the check for the money that I created on the grid that I didn't use? Well, at least here in the United States, that's not going to happen. Okay? But what will happen is you will get to a delta of 0. So, if you do net metering, they do that on what's called a 12-month billing cycle. So they take a look at your bill on a 12-month cycle, and at the end of that 12 month, they do what's called a true-up period. And that true-up period says that in that 12 months, you generated this much power at this much value of credit, and you used this much power at this much value of credit. You're responsible to pay the delta that's in between. Okay? Now, when we engineer a system, we want to get as close to 0 as we can on that delta, but we don't want to go over. Because if we overgenerate, the utility just says, thank you for the power, and you will not get a check at the end of the year for overgenerating power. It's just not going to happen. You will only get to 0. Now, I have relatives in my own family that argue that point with me. I said, so in the last 5 years you had solar, have you ever gotten a check? Well, no. Then why are you saying you're going to get a check when you know you don't? Now, there are some rules on the book. I won't call them laws, but there's some rules on the book that says that you're supposed to get paid for that power. But the way the utilities have worded their response to those rulings, it means that you'll never get a check for overproducing power. Let's just say that. You'll never get a check here in the United States, currently today, with the way it is. Now, so you never want to really overgenerate on purpose, because it's not going to benefit you in any way, right? So as you're doing that, what you want to take a look at is the way the engineers take a look at a solar system is they say, if you're generating power in the daytime at 16 cents a kilowatt hour, and most of your power bills, I didn't bring a power bill with me, but most of your power bills will have on there how much you're paying per kilowatt hour for the most part. If you're paying 16 cents a kilowatt hour for power during the day, you're probably spending 9 cents a kilowatt hour for power at night. So right now it's dark outside, and we're running on grid power, right? That grid power is costing this establishment maybe 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So if I create on net metering a credit at 16 cents, and I use it at night at 9 cents, my delta is, I have to engineer my delta so it's close to zero. So during the day I might overproduce so that I get more credits at night. And so the system, whether you're home or not, if it's turned on, will create credits. If you're in Hawaii on vacation, it'll create credits. The engineering comes into balancing between the daytime retail credits and the nighttime use credits and how that works on your system. Okay? Real quick, there's one other thing I want to talk to you about on your power bill that I always like to talk to people about, and that is the incentives that come from the utilities. And the incentives that come from the utilities, they're great. Some of the utilities can give incentives, those kinds of things. Different things. But what I want you to do, and I've talked with people who are experts in the energy business, people who are in the energy business, and I ask them this question, and they don't know the answer to it. And so I like to pose this question to you, and go home, or wherever you're at. If you're on vacation in Mumbai, go home and check it out. So I don't know if it works in India, so I say that in jest. But look at your power bill. And on your power bill, there's a line item. And that line item is called the PPP or the PPG. Stands for Public Purpose Good or Public Purpose Program. What it is, it's a percentage of your monthly bill. And a percentage of your monthly bill goes into that program. And I ask a lot of people, do you know what that is? Do you know what a PPP is? You go, well, no. I showed one guy one time, every month his business was putting $4,000 a month into the PPP. And he never questioned what it was for. My purpose for asking this is read your power bill. What a PPP is a percentage of your power bill goes into this program. That program is what pays for the Energy Star rebates. That's what pays for solar rebates. That's what pays for the rebate programs that the utilities provide. So if you're putting money into that, you should draw money from it. I talked with somebody not too long ago. I did a rough calculation. Over the last 35 years, they've paid over $8,000 into that program, yet they've never requested a single rebate on a single light bulb. Why not? Right? So we need to look at our power bills. So in closing, read your power bills. See what it's about. Talk to somebody about solar. Let us know what's going on. Right? And I look forward to talking to you again in the future. We're going to be doing this once a month. The subject will always be the same, but I will always talk about something different because that's who I am. But join us next month and join us at some of the other sessions, and check us out on Facebook, and give Charles a call. His number is going to be attached to some of these things as well. And we thank you very much for your time and your support. I look forward to doing solar with you. Take care. Thank you.
Chris, is that date open for you? The 17th. So we will be back here next month on the 17th of April to discuss further the benefits of ownership of solar. We believe it's the only way to go because you basically pay for itself. So join us next month on the 17th of April for Sunny Assets.